Good afternoon, hello. Just trying to see the light. Okay. All right, so happy Tuesday. And how are you doing today? Hopefully you are having a great week so far. So if for those of you who don't know me, my name is Evelina Hovic and I am a manifestation coach and mentor. And today I am just making sure the tech is working well. So today I thought I'm going to start this new feature of Live on Tuesday or Tuesday Lives. I'm not sure I'm going to call it. And I am going to tell you some stories from my personal life and also from the life of my clients and some people that may decide to remain anonymous, and that's totally okay. But the reason for me telling you the story is to get to know you better, allow you to, I would love to get to know you better and see what kind of questions you have so I can help you, but also to introduce a little bit and tell you a bit more about my life and about the stories and tell you that how my journey has been and basically share just stories and conversation. So today I thought I'm gonna go kind of to the beginning and the beginning of beginning. I'll tell you a story manifestation story that I didn't even know was a manifestation story, and just to show you an example that how we manifest all the time, whether we want it or not. It's not something like some people have it and some don't. We all manifest all the time, and the thing is that most of us do manifest unconsciously most of the time. It's not a deliberate conscious manifestation, but once you understand how things kind of add up and how you can put two and two together and you can see, oh my god, this is what happened and why that happened, then you can start manifesting more deliberately and more consciously, and then your life can be not just a little bit of bad and a little bit of good and a little bit of bad and a little bit of good, which is what we usually see, but be more good and better and then even better and good and really, really good and really, really, really good. So let me tell you a story. I remember sitting. I was sitting on a patio in Toronto, and I was 21. I was here because I'm now in Toronto too. But at the time, I was visiting a dear friend of mine, actually a classmate that we used to go to school together in Ukraine, and we met in Toronto after. Just a little bit of a background story. So I immigrated when I was a teenager from Ukraine. My family immigrated to Israel, and then a lot of my classmates at the time immigrated because there was a breakdown of Soviet Union, and most of my friends fled Ukraine and ended up in also different countries. Lots of people ended up in the States, and some in Australia, some in Canada. And many in Israel as well, which is where I ended up with my family. Anyway, 7 years later, we had a bit of a reunion in Toronto. Now, so that you understand, at that time we were writing letters to each other. There was no social media, there were no phones, there were phones, but it was international phone calls that nobody was making at the time because all immigrants, we never had money to pay international phone bills. So we wrote letters to each other and we stayed in touch for all of those years. And we ended up coming together to Toronto to meet after 7 years of not seeing each other. So we were basically teenagers when we said goodbye to each other and not knowing when and if we're going to meet again. And there we were, about 5 of us, meeting in Toronto at 20 some plus, 2021. Oh no, what am I? That's right. That is right. My math is correct. And we were in Toronto, and it was incredible because we haven't seen each other since we were like kids, and now we're adults. So anyway, that was all exciting. That was all very cool. And there we were sitting in Toronto. So I remember at that time, so I was at the time living in Israel, and I just finished my army service, and I was on and actually I finished my college at the time as well. And at that point, I was thinking of going further into continue my education, whether it's going to be in the university somewhere in Israel, or we're looking at different options outside of Israel. I wasn't sure at that point what I was doing. I think I was just finishing my college. if my memory doesn't fail me. Anyway, so at that time, I did not know English. I knew Russian was my mother tongue, and then at that point I knew Hebrew really well, obviously fluent, because of everything that I have done in Israel at that time. Anyway, so I had very basic knowledge of English, and I was sitting in Toronto. Go back to my beginning of my story, and seeing that on the patio in some, I don't remember the restaurant name. It was downtown Toronto, and all of my friends were very fluent in English. Some of them were my ex-classmates, where some of them were living in Canada, some of them were some of them were from, trying to remember, I think they were anyway traveling a lot. So I digress here. Anyway, many of them were, well, the ones that were in Canada for sure knew English really well, and my English was really, really bad. And I remember sitting there at the time and thinking, oh my gosh, first of all, I never ever again want to feel so inadequate. And that was my own perception of myself. I don't think, if I asked my friends, they would never probably say anything like that, but I was feeling very inadequate because I couldn't even make an order in a confident way, and suddenly people couldn't understand me what I was saying, and I had to repeat, and it was just like, it was such a mess. So my first decision at that time was like, I never ever want to ever feel again not being able to communicate freely. And at that time I was so that was the first thing. The second thing, I remember sitting in Toronto there, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is what wealth is all about. I was like, this is the life of downtown Toronto. I connected to the place. You know, sometimes when you go to places and you feel so connected, this is what my feeling was. I felt so connected. I felt so like, this is where I would love to live. So that was my second big desire that was born. Now, at that point, I have zero idea about manifestation mindset or anything like that. So I still remember though the feeling like, I just hope that one day I wish to, like, this is my dream, to live in Toronto. So at the time, I went back after this beautiful vacation. I went back to Israel, and I was so determined to potentially, like, to live in Toronto. Somehow I gotta end up there. And I started researching universities in Toronto. And after a little bit of back and forth and a bit of research, it wasn't really a viable option, and it wasn't gonna happen for me. So I ended up going to London, England, to continue my studies in hotel management, and then continued there to master's in IT, and I started working there, and it was just one thing to another. So getting to London was answering my first desire that was born back in Toronto, that my English was going to get to the level of, proficiency. And after a very short time in London, because I ended up working in the reservations department in a hotel where I had to sell over the phone, not even without people seeing you, which is kind of makes it a bit easy if you can use your body language and explain yourself. But as a new immigrant now, again, in England, I had to get my English very quickly to a level where I could speak and sell in English, which was a whole other story for another time. So anyway, that was the first desire that was answered at that point in England, that my English got to the point where after the 6 months in that reservation department, dealing with all sorts of different accents from all over the world, I was like, bring it on. I can have a conversation on any topic, and I can speak to anybody with any accent, and I'll be all right. The next thing though, in London, I ended up staying in London for many more years. And at that time, Canada was not even an option. If you're joining me, you can say hi. I would love to hear from you, and tell me where you're coming from. I'm just telling a story about my manifestation experience from manifesting my life in Canada, actually living in Canada. So anyway, where I ended up living I ended up going to London and staying in London for many years, and it was just one thing after another. At that point, again, I have no idea about manifestation, what it means and how it works. So one degree after another, after being offered a job, and I ended up then getting married and having a child. And all of this time is happening, and Canada is nowhere to be seen. I'm like, there's nothing in my life that brings up an opportunity to go to Canada. And then what happened was we decided life in London was really tricky as far as documentation goes. So I ended up finishing my master's in IT and working in a big internet company as a product manager in website hosting. I was getting promoted. My career was going relatively well. Was it something that I was really crazy about? No, but at the time, no, like where I come from, nobody was asking me what it is that you're passionate about. What do you want to do? It was like, get a good education, get a good job, and just then get yourself up the career ladder up until, you know, whatever happens. And that's exactly what I was doing. I wasn't even like, there was no opportunity or option to do something different, or like passion. What passion? Who's going to pay you for your passion? So anyway, so I am then working in London in this big internet company, and because things in England were changing and the internet industry was kind of going down, there were a lot of people were getting fired and losing their jobs all the time. And I was on a work permit, and my family were dependent on my work permit. And if I was going to lose my job, then we would have to leave immediately, basically. And that was not an exciting prospect at all. So at that time, we said like, well, what are we going to do if we don't really see ourselves going back to Israel and settling there as a family? Then what are we going to do? So we wanted to go to United States, like as an American dream, right? The only problem was that it was just after 9/11, and the immigration to United States was not possible anymore at that time. So we was like, okay, where do we go? We don't want to go to Australia because it's too far from a family that both of my ex-husband and my family were in Israel. And like, how do we go to Australia? That's way too far, and our parents are getting older. And it wasn't really an option. Well, it was option, but we didn't consider it. We didn't want to consider it as an option. So then it was like Canada. I'm like, oh my God, well, I've always wanted to live in Canada. So this is now we're talking about, I was in Canada in, oh my God, I can't remember the years, but basically by the time we decided that we're gonna apply for immigration to Canada, and that process took a little while, and by the time we actually got approved and ended up going to Canada to live in Canada, and I'm wrapping up my story on this, it took 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. So what I'm trying to say is that some dreams take a long time, especially because I wasn't deliberately creating. My desire was so strong that I was born to get to know English and to live in Canada, but I wasn't clearly working on it, so to speak. I wasn't imagining, wasn't visualizing, I wasn't doing all of the things. I had no idea about meditation. I had no idea about any of what I'm so good at now. And yet, because the desire was so strong, and because I wasn't really resisting it, because I wasn't desperate of getting to Canada, it was like rocket of desire was launched, and then I was carrying on with my life and just choosing things that were the most desirable, the most like fitting where I was going. It was one thing to another, one thing led to another, and then with all that co-creation got me to the point where now I have an opportunity to go to Canada, and now we actually enter Canada and we start our life in Canada. So the point of the story is that when I look back and I understand exactly now what happened. Now, even when I got to Canada, I wasn't good at this manifestation thing. I remember seeing a post on my Facebook wall, one of those memory posts, it was the first year when we came to Canada, and I was like, I posted something like, I'm fed up with traffic in Toronto. And this seems like it was a different version of me talking at that time, because when I remember really well when I started my road to personal development, and I got into listening to audios on mindset and law of attraction, I was looking forward to traffic. Funnily enough, I was looking forward to traffic because that meant that I could spend more time driving by myself, having that time for myself and listening to and absorb more of that information. And that was amazing. But it wasn't like this all the time. So what I'm saying is that sometimes desires can take a long time. But because when desire is so strong, even though you may not be working on it, it will happen because when there is no resistance. And this is exactly happened. There was no resistance, but there was no deliberate creation. There was no deliberate wanting of it and repetition of what I could have done if I knew what I was doing. I probably would have ended up in Canada much sooner. Who knows? Although, having said that, everything that happened on the way to getting me to Canada, from that moment when I back in that cafe on a patio, when like dreaming of like, this is what would be a dream come true, to coming to that dream come true took many years. So this is the story for today. Now, if you have any questions, I'm just going to check because I will just see if there was any questions that were, I can't even see this here, that were sent to me prior to. Okay, so one question that is often I get asked is that how do you stay in the feel good state of mind when what you want, what you really want, is not coming? How do you find yourself how can you be grateful for what is if you're focused in what is, if it's not what you want, and stay in that clear state of mind? Actually, in fact, let me read your question, so instead of me guessing what the question was. So just give me 1 second. Okay, so the question is, all right, well, sorry, 1 second. So how do you stay in a feeling of joy when the other side of your actually brain that you're taking too long? So basically, how do you stay in that way? You're basically criticizing yourself, what you want is not there yet, and how you're grateful for what it is, for what is. And the thing is, this is where whenever, it's probably one of the most challenging things to do, when you're keeping that desire in mind, keeping where you're going in front of you, while realizing where you are is not where you want to be. And how do you stay in feeling good? So the best way to really do that is realize how far have you come so far. So we often go, it's always the next thing, it's always the next step, it's always the next step. But if you look back and you realize how far you have come, because where you are today, you will never be tomorrow, because today is now, and it's only exists right now. And realize that you have come a long way, and notice being more in the present and realizing and acknowledging yourself and celebrating the little wins along the way, the little steps that you're taking every day towards your desire. Because the thing is, if you're going to be thinking of that desire of yours and being desperate to get it, like you so want it, and if you don't have it, you're not happy, it's probably never gonna come. Because the way to bring it into your life, the way to speed up that process is wanting it, getting really clear what you want, but also be okay without having it. And also imagine, this is the pro tip right there, imagine yourself as if you already have it, because all those dimensions exist already. That reality that you can envision, if you can envision a dream, if you can think like, I want this, I am like, I wish I could have that, I wish this, I wish there, I wish him, I wish that, I wish clothes, anything from little things to the big things. If you can envision it, if you can imagine it, it means that it already exists. If it already exists, it can be yours. How do you bring it into your reality, into your bank account? By getting into the state of feeling, what would you feel like as if you already have it? Once you get into that feeling, this is where, tap into that feeling, and then, so to speak, release it. And how do you release it? Saying like, well, I'm still good if I don't have it, and how you still good if you don't have it. If you start finding gratitude and blessings on where you are, if you start celebrating more what you have done than what you haven't done, if you start realizing and appreciating yourself more than you start criticizing and bashing yourself. And this is how you release that resistance, how you open up and making yourself available for what's coming and what you desire. So on this note, if there are no other questions here live, I'm gonna wrap up for today. And as I predicted, it would take about 20 minutes. If you have any questions, please leave them below this video, and I will make sure I will answer them in the next live stream. Have yourself a wonderful Tuesday, and I will see you again soon. Bye.